Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. To give a little bit of context, Cambridge Assessment is a not-for-profit organisation with a turnover of £310 million, with 8 million candidates a year sitting its exams in over 170 countries. We're an integral part of the University of Cambridge, and depending on which part of the educational landscape you occupy, you will have heard of one of our brands: Oxford, Cambridge and RSA Examinations, Cambridge English Language Assessment, or Cambridge International Examinations. One of our divisions produces nearly 5 million exams in general business and academic English and has exam centres across the globe. Another division is the world's largest provider of international programmes and qualifications for 5 to 19-year-olds, covering all the main subject areas. It works, for example, with the Singapore Exams Board to jointly award the state qualification for students in secondary school. And in recent years, we've become increasingly involved in educational reform projects in places such as Egypt, Kazakhstan, Bahrain and Mongolia. So, to turn to the subject of today, the Middle East. Home to 3 of the world's great religions, home to mathematics and most of the science known until the Enlightenment, and today, home to 250 million people, about half that of the EU. So although culturally, geographically and economically diverse, Arabic is the lingua franca of the region, and regardless of the current affairs in any individual country, there are some huge challenges that face all governments of the region. Firstly, almost all of them are faced with a rapidly rising population, a 61% increase in the last 2 decades. Secondly, that population is increasingly young, most of the countries having nearly a third of their people being under 14 years of age. The comparable figure in the UK is 18%. Thirdly, globalisation is affecting the Middle East as much as it affects us, but in a different context. The production of an abundant supply of a low-wage, low-skilled labour as a route to rapid growth, as taken by the Far East, no longer works. At the same time, in this particular part of the world, it is becoming clear that one cannot build a sustainable economy based solely on finite carbon resources. The global knowledge economy is upon us, and it is only by having a well-educated workforce producing knowledge-intensive goods that countries can create sustainable growth that delivers the quantity and quality of jobs needed. And this is as true of the Middle East as it is of the UK. Almost all the states in the Middle East are aware of these forces. Over the past 20 years, governments have invested in primary education to the point that the World Bank recognises the region has essentially caught up with East Asia and Latin America, both in terms of enrolment and gender parity. Of course, we all know it takes decades to work through low initial levels of education development, and there's still much to be done. But it's clear there is a sound plinth on which to build. Governments across the region are now turning their full attention to the secondary and tertiary sectors. Some reform was carried out in the past, but the impact of globalisation and the knowledge economy has led to rethinking across the Middle East. Although there are major differences, some common themes do emerge. All across the region, there are increased budget allocations for educational development, and scarcely a month passes without some tender being put out by some government. Governments are also seeking to benchmark the learning outcomes of their students against international standards, with a view to improving them for employment and higher education opportunities. There is a general recognition that it is the teacher that makes most of the difference in the quality of outcomes, and therefore there is a growing focus on the importance of training teachers and offering continued professional development. As with the students, this usually requires some form of initial benchmarking of teacher quality in order to ascertain the route by which they can be improved. Naturally enough, there is ongoing extensive reform of school curricula as nations look to embed critical thinking and problem-solving skills into the day-to-day life of the classroom. And again, naturally enough, there are many discussions as to how the success or otherwise of all of these reforms are to be measured. Governments are asking what skills, knowledge and understanding should be assessed, how should they be assessed, and what will that assessment mean when measured against an international standard of some sort. The place of English teaching and learning in all of this is interesting. English is the medium of instruction and operation in the oil and gas industry in the Middle East. English is the language of science and the internet, mostly. English is often the language of business between those speaking different tongues, which means that some form of standardized English is needed. So it's not surprising that we have seen growth of 69% in English language qualifications over the last 4 years. As elsewhere in the world, there is a debate about whether one teaches English, maths and science through the local language, Arabic in this case, or through the medium of English. There are good arguments on both sides, and different countries will undoubtedly take different decisions on these issues in accordance with their own cultural and educational norms. And underpinning occasionally and running alongside state school reforms is the growth of private schools. The growing middle class in the region is acutely aware that an education to international standards, with international qualifications recognised around the world in higher education and international work, is what their children need to succeed. But one caveat is needed here. It does not do to enter the Middle East with English ideas about the private-public split. In few countries is the divide as sharp between the two sectors as it is here in the UK. And in this region in particular, the boundaries between the two are much more fluid. For instance, in some places, the state itself encourages private schools. As part of Qatar's ongoing educational reform, the Outstanding Schools Programme, an initiative of Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser Al Misned, started in 2007 with the aim of encouraging international private schools to open branches in Qatar. Sherborne School and the International School of London are two particular British schools currently operating under this scheme. Elsewhere, in the UAE, for example, student numbers are rising about 7% a year. It is anticipated that by 2020, not that far away, Dubai alone will require an extra 100 schools. The demand for foreign university places is also growing in the UAE at a rate of 15% per annum. And naturally, alongside this, the demand for international qualifications that are recognised around the world is growing. Sometimes found in the state sector, they're more often delivered by private schools, particularly those with an international flavour. For instance, we have seen growth in such examinations of 33% in this region over the past 4 years, with a growth of 23% in schools becoming Cambridge International Schools. Now, leaving aside this growth in the private sector for academic offerings and the growth in international curricula and tests to motivate learners and drive up standards in English, such as at the Abu Bakr As-Siddiq Secondary School in Qatar or the Al-Afaq Model School in the UAE, the main challenge for governments is one Cambridge assessment has seen many times before in its 150-year history. And it's that history that uniquely, perhaps, enables us to help with the challenge. And it's this: how does a country drive up standards to an international level, which is set by others, whilst preserving its own culture and mores? How does a country get the benefits of globalization without importing the disbenefits into its own system? How to ensure that when teaching an international language like English, one's children do not lose any facility in their mother tongue? Well, the way chosen by most governments is through a partnership, which involves capacity building with the relatively frequent checks to ensure nothing is being lost in the drive to modernise. For instance, when the Abu Dhabi Education Council introduced a new bilingual language education programme in their school sector, one of the providers, CFBT, sought to evaluate the effectiveness of their reform, and we were asked to help. The study looked at how bilingual education provision affected students' understanding of content subjects, their proficiency in both Arabic and English as a foreign language, and students' behaviour, discipline, and relationships with peers and teachers. The extent to which the bilingual programme fostered maintenance of national identity and students' own heritage was also assessed. The report showed a positive picture, with success stories including improved English language proficiency, as you might expect, but an increase in student-centred teaching practices as well as an increase in collaborative working amongst teachers. School principals saw these key changes as being a direct result of the programme. Typical responses of the researchers included, from a student, I think learning any foreign... Whoops, sorry. I think learning any foreign language makes a person more confident and doesn't affect his own identity or heritage, but he must keep reading and speaking his own language. From parents, we only speak Arabic at home. We maintain our national habits and traditions. We can transfer these to our children. English is only at school. And of course, as you can see on the slide, it doesn't matter which language I speak, it will never weaken my national identity. Alternatively, some states start by using experts in assessment to benchmark the quality of teachers. Lebanon has a 5-year project developing rehabilitation assistance to schools and teachers' improvement, designed to improve educational outcomes. The project began with a nationwide assessment of 4,000 teachers in order to enable the Ministry of Higher Education to target training for teachers who use English as their instructional language and thereby enhance the teachers' in-service professional development. And the reports that we produced were successfully used to assess those training requirements for those teachers. So, capacity building is taking place across the whole region in relation to teacher training. Some states are going further. Bahrain, for instance, has decided to build its own national examinations unit from scratch. Alongside this, the Bahrainis wish to develop world-class national tests at grades 3, 6 and 9, along with numeracy and literacy tests at grade 12. So since 2007, we've been helping their reform programme recruit, select and train staff within the new National Examinations Unit. We've been producing new test syllabuses in Arabic, Maths, Science and English at each grade, developing item banks, pre-testing and piloting items in both the UK and Bahrain, setting, administering and processing live tests in each subject, supervising the marking in Bahrain, and holding regular training and development workshops to effect a broad skills transfer. Thus, Bahrain is already mainly self-sufficient in the testing and assessment field. A bit of a triumph. Oman, similarly, is looking to establish a national assessment centre for the school education system, develop a national qualifications framework, and to undertake all of this through an online platform. Now, states that are larger and less economically advantaged than Bahrain and Oman have made other choices. Egypt has gone down the Beacon School route. Called the Nile Egyptian Schools Programme, the objective is to create a new school in each of the 29 governorates in the country. They'll be bilingual and international in outlook, and from them, curricula and good modern practice will be disseminated throughout the Egyptian schooling system. We're writing the curriculum and related assessments and examinations in English for most subjects, and Arabic for some. The learning outcomes have been linked to internationally recognised standards. Admissions tests to assist student recruitment, end-of-year progression tests, and national teacher recruitment tests are a core part of the offer. In addition, we're providing consultancy, teaching guides, training of teachers and principals in curriculum delivery, together with project management infrastructure, and starting with 5 pilot schools. Another related project in Egypt is the reform of teacher education. You cannot reform school education without reforming teacher education as well. Now, the objective here is to create a complete system paralleling UK best practice that will be implemented initially in 3 faculties of education. Teachers will be trained in modern pedagogic approaches in the context of the Nile schools curriculum and will, in the first instance, be destined for employment in those schools. The project is being managed by us, but will be delivered by the Education Faculty of Cambridge University. In the longer term, the aim is to a wider dissemination, both through further faculties of education in Egypt and through the employment of those teachers qualified in new methodologies into non-Nile schools. Now, in addition to driving up standards in academic and general studies, Middle Eastern governments are concerned about more vocational opportunities. It's widely recognised that many young adults do not have enough skills for employability, and this may well impact on society, stability, and the ability to respond to future global needs. In the UAE, for example, local employability is part of the 5-year plan in the energy, banking, aviation and telecom sectors. The long-term aim is to replace expat employees with local employees. And many countries have a system in place that encourages companies to recruit local staff and train them up in a variety of industries at different levels. And once again, English language makes an entrance. In Abu Dhabi, the Vocational Education Development Centre is working with us to ensure its students graduate with English skills they need to succeed in the workplace. The VEDC's mission is to provide an alternative education for Emirati boys aged between 14 and 23, developing their character, their academic and vocational skills in order to give them a better chance of employment. Shortly after it opened, it was discovered that its graduates often found English a barrier in the workplace, especially in relation to many of its industry partners where English was widely spoken. The addition of 2 English programs into the centre's operations is considered a real benefit. Former principal Dr. Qader Abid stated, "Cambridge English has helped us to set the English language standards needed to develop trainees with the skills industry needs." In Saudi Arabia, the King has authorised the development of a major public-private partnership to introduce technical and vocational education using Saudi skills standards delivered through international consortia. The initiative also includes the establishment of international training centres to deliver specific skills in key industries. And at the same time, it's recognised that adults in the 18 to 30 range with few current skills need to be catered for, with separate training to increase soft skills, basic English and ICT. In Bahrain, the UK's Technical Vocational Education and Training has signed an MOU with Tamkeen, a Bahrain government-backed agency that provides courses in skills training and business management. The MOU is intended to, and I quote, enhance the level of training provided to Bahrainis. The partnership may also involve Tamkeen developing internationally recognised training programmes, so a potential competitor to us all. Finally, and perhaps of most interest to those attending the VET show, digital options are being considered for learning, teaching and assessment. Many states, most notably in the Gulf, have the necessary bandwidth, although others have further to go. For instance, in Jordan, the Queen Rania Foundation has opened a portal for digital learning in the Arabic language. Using the Open edX platform for MOOCs, content from providers such as Stanford, MIT and Harvard is available at no cost. EDRAC also intends to offer original content from Arabic institutions. In Saudi Arabia, Promethean has won a contract to sell its multi-user interactive display systems to educational institutions covering 5,000 classrooms and 700 laboratories. And the UAE government is actively looking to delivering the curriculum using an electronic platform which will include video lessons to help in self-education for all, from remote areas to cities. And the tertiary sector has moved to mobile learning with the introduction of iPads. However, there are questions about how one moves from the still popular traditional model of pedagogy straight to a digital pedagogy which focuses on the teacher as facilitator without first moving through student-centered learning and a focus on critical thinking. Now, many of you here at BET will be familiar with the challenges of implementing a new whole school technological model of teaching, even when half the teachers are ready, willing and able. To sum up then, the Middle East faces many of the challenges being met around the world, but has specific local contexts that require a willingness by us to learn from them, to understand the challenges in a very real way, and to engage in a form of partnership that delivers international levels of education to their expanding youth cohort, whilst preserving the best of the nation's culture. Not a lot to ask, but a real challenge to deliver. And only those with a sound commitment to pedagogic advance are going to succeed. Thank you.